The purpose of this video is to go over examples of a one-sided limit. And if we look at this question, if we go back to homework 1, this is very similar to number 4 in section 1.2. So number 4 has to deal with these one-sided limits. And if you look at the answer key that's posted in Blackboard, you can see that I wrote up the answers here. And it turns out if we look at the limit as 3 goes to the right, on top it goes to 3, but on bottom we're looking at numbers that are always larger than 3. So if I plug in a number that's larger than 3 and I subtract 3, an example of a number larger than 3, I could say 3.01. If I plug that in there, 3.01 minus 3, then I would have 0.01, and 3 divided by 0.01. And then I could look at 3.001 or 3.00001. And if you plug that in, you can see the output gets closer and closer to infinity. The same thing on B, I'm on the left side of 3, so my top goes to 3. My bottom, here the numbers would be like 2.99. 2.99 minus 3 is going to 0, but it's always negative, right? So this would be 2.99, 2.9999, getting closer and closer to 0, but it's always negative. 1 over something going to 0, and this is the note here, 1 or a constant or a constant divided by something going to 0 is plus or minus infinity, depending on what's going on here, if the constant's negative or if the denominator is always negative. And then, of course, here, since the limit on the right does not equal the limit on the left, the limit doesn't exist at that point. Another way to kind of see it is graph it. So let's look at this specific question. And you got to be a little, you got to keep things together, so you have to be a little careful what's going on here. On top, it's going to 1. On bottom, here, I always like to draw a number line and look at 1, and I'm always on the right side of 1. So these numbers are like 1.001 or 1.0001. If I plugged in these numbers, 1 minus 1.0001 is going to be negative, right? 1 minus a bigger number is a negative number. So this is going to 0, but always negative. Right, so 1 over something going to 0 goes to infinity, but since it's always negative, the answer here would be negative infinity. Right, and then of course we could look at the limit as x goes to 1 from the left of the exact same function. And I look at my number line, and I'm on the left side here. So I'm always smaller than 1, so like 0.9999. So this is going to 0. But 1 minus 0.9999 is always going to be positive. So 1 over something going to 0 goes to infinity, and since it's always positive, it goes to positive infinity. Another person said you could graph it and see what's going on. So if we look at a graph of this function, so if I kind of zoom in here at this interesting point, this point being 1 here, I look at the limit on the left, right? I go to positive infinity. If I look at the limit on the right, I go to minus infinity of this function. I can get it to see what's going on here. This is a graph of a function like 1 over x. Going here, we get on the right, it goes to minus infinity. On the left, it goes to positive infinity. So hopefully this kind of explains what's going on here. Something like this generally shows up on the final exam on exam 1B. So it was a good question.